Welcome back. My name still is Steve Saylor. In the second video, we're continuing our discussion about the nature of IQ and diversity. To put it again in gamer terms, the idea that some people, and by proxy some groups, have different character builds tends to freak people out these days. They imagine that we live in a world where every player has the same skill points. Of course, maybe for the powers that be, it's easier to imagine ruling over a world of copycat NPCs. But it's obvious people have different character builds. Some of it appears to be genetic, much of it is also cultural. We can see it in other traits around the world. For example, height. These are the Mbuti people, a population of African pygmies who live in the dense jungles of Central Africa. The average height for a full-grown male is 4'11". And these are the Dinka of South Sudan. They have an average male height of nearly 6 feet and have produced several notable giants such as NBA players Manute Bol and his son Bol Bol. The Dinka's extraordinary native height allowed the South Sudan to nearly defeat the USA Olympic basketball team in 2024. And here are the Samoans, whose prowess in American football and rugby seems to owe to their tremendous size combined with excellent speed. Different peoples from different regions of the world express different traits. If you watch the Olympics, you'll notice that gives certain countries and population groups advantages in some sports over others. In the 100-meter dash, for example, every finalist during the last 11 Olympics, except one, 87 out of 88 going back to 1984, has been at least of half West African descent. Yet, the reality of human diversity remains remarkably difficult for many of our leading intellectuals and cultural commentators to acknowledge. This is partly because they think that if you acknowledge that people are different in all sorts of ways that we can see, they might also be different in all sorts of ways we can't see. That is, people might get the idea that evolution and the differences it creates might not stop at the neck. Some people and groups might have certain cognitive differences that create different outcomes on average, and especially at the extreme ends of performance. The most fearful among us seem to believe that even acknowledging the different talents or abilities people have, their different character builds, is to justify violence and oppression. Regardless of differences, all people are deserving of dignity and equality under the law. All people are made in the image of God. And what about intelligence? What about IQ? It is good to remember that over our own lives, we are not even equal to ourselves. That is how elusive equality and IQ truly is. For example, as I have gotten older, my raw IQ processing power has dropped considerably. The young Steve Saylor of 30 years of age would be frustrated at times with the old Steve you're watching right now. Should I therefore be dehumanized, genocided, or simply treated unkindly because I'm not as bright as I used to be? Nah. Equality, when we can actually create it, such as of all men before the law, can be a good thing. It is important in any discussion about race and IQ to remember that we are dealing with generalizations. Every race turns out geniuses, and it's not really giving people their fair shake to assume that acquaintances in your life must be Isaac Newton for being in one group or a dummy if they're in another. Nobody really believes that. I mean, consider the source. The same people who say race isn't real are usually the same people who say sex isn't real, that there truly are no biological differences between girls and boys. In truth, biology and genetics are real. Not everything can be wished away using the alchemy of words. You'll notice also the idea that race doesn't exist is something those same people never say when topics such as, affirmative action or diversity, inclusion, and equity come up. In my book Noticing, I wrote, the most rigorous definition of a racial group is a partly inbred extended family. Race is about who your ancestors are on your biological family tree. In practice, the federal government simply asks people to self-identify. Is that scientific? Well, it turns out to be good enough for government work. Ashkenazi Jews, European Jews, appear to average the highest, maybe around 108 to 110, followed by Northeast Asians, maybe 105, then by Gentile white Europeans and North Americans, about 100. The world mean is around 90, about where Hispanic Americans tend to score. African Americans traditionally average in the mid to upper 80s, and Africans in the difficult environment of sub-Saharan Africa in the 70s. No, environment is a large factor. Consider South Koreans, who today are both much taller and much higher scoring on cognitive tests than their grandparents in 1960. Their only problem is they've stopped reproducing. Not in the most important sense of predictive validity. White and black Army recruits with 100 IQs on the AFQT, for instance, will perform about equally well on the job. Any kind of non-functional, non-predictive bias against minorities in test design has been radioactive for generations. So all the questions that were unfair to minorities were removed long ago. As research into human genetics gets more advanced, we're only going to know more about the nature of not only IQ, but also of genetic ancestry. Race science companies such as Ancestry.com and 23andMe have already mainstreamed thinking about genetic ancestry in more rigorously scientific ways. The mainstream media and academia's cosmic horror over thinking about IQ differences between groups only seems to make it more of an explosive topic. This conspiracy of silence actually contributes to thinking that some groups must be less in a moral sense than others just because they have a lower average IQ. A healthy discussion about IQ and even race and IQ helps to make the topic less politically salacious. No, first of all, you're watching my video, so you're obviously a bright person. So, you're likely on the right side of the bell curve. Second, there's vast variation within all groups. For example, about 7 or 8 million African Americans score above the average IQ for white Americans. In summary, I believe the truth is better for us than ignorance, lies, or wishful thinking. Until next time, be sure to like and subscribe, and above all else, keep noticing.